Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Birding with Extensions, this edition of Cup Chat. It's just us today. We're so sorry to disappoint, but it's just Maureen and I, and we're excited today just to kind of take a step back. We've enjoyed all of our special guests, but Maureen and I are just going to talk today, guys. It's been a long time since it's just been the two of us, and we've not really had, we have a thing we're going to talk about, but we don't really have any rules, and when it's just the two of us, I can for sure break all of them. So good morning. We hope you have your cup of coffee and you're ready to sit down. One thing before we start, I want to kind of do a little bit of an announcement is on December 3rd. We are going to be hosting a new program virtually called Building Birding on Your Land and Building Birding on Private Lands. But basically, here in Texas, it's about 95% privately owned property. And so as we work through Birding with Extension to connect our birders with our landowners, it's important to educate y'all that are landowners about how to create a birding enterprise on your property. And so on December 3rd, you can join us from the comfort of your couch and learn about a little bit of the logistics, a little bit of the management practices that you can do to have an effective birding enterprise on your private land. So, Maureen, any plugs on that before we move on?
Yeah, I think even if you're not a landowner, it's kind of fun to listen and see some of the things that our landowners in Texas do to manage birds on private land. So it may be of interest even if you're not a landowner or if you're considering becoming a landowner. Because sometimes people are, you're kind of at that stage where you would like to buy property maybe a couple of years from now, and you know that you can get, say a wildlife tax valuation, but you're not exactly sure how that works. And we'll talk about some of those management strategies that can be used for birds. So I think that's kind of a fun thing to check out, even if you're not currently a landowner. But yeah, if you are for sure, and you want to think about kind of moving into the birding realm of things, hopefully this will be a few tips to get you started.
Yes. Well, and also we do have our Facebook Live up. So if you have questions during the conversation, definitely shoot us a comment. Hi, Miss Ellen. Thank you so much for joining us and watching this morning. So I had to put a Santa hat on a little bird yesterday and post it on Facebook. And we are talking about Christmas bird count today, guys. And my dad would just be absolutely mortified. My dad was you can't put the Christmas tree up until the day after Thanksgiving. Why does Hobby Lobby and Walmart put up their Christmas early? So, Maureen, why are we talking about this now?
Yeah, and that's funny because I kind of think of Hobby Lobby as like the number one rule breaker of that, and I remember
110% they're the rule breaker.
But I remember asking my mom as a kid, because their stuff comes out like way before everybody else, and she was like, "Well, if you're gonna make Christmas crafts, you have to start earlier than Christmas, right? Like you can't if you're gonna make a Christmas quilt or something, you can't start the day after Thanksgiving because you might not be done in time." And so the reason we are talking about Christmas bird count today is a little bit similar in that if you want to participate in the Christmas bird count, you should start thinking about it now, because this is when most of the circles, and we can talk about what a circle is, most of the circles are opening up their sign up. And actually, specifically today, I want to talk about this because with COVID, that's posed some challenges to what exactly the Christmas bird counts will look like. And Audubon is the organization that runs Christmas bird counts, and they had set today as the earliest date that circles could declare whether they would hold their count and what exactly that would look like for this year. So usually we're, from year to year, you kind of know exactly what it'll look like. Things look a little bit different this year. And so they had said this is the earliest that you can kind of declare, because they wanted to wait and see how local situations are unfolding. So, but what that means is that I can happily announce that the Uvalde Circle will be holding our Christmas bird count. So,
well, that would be fun, and I would love to join your Christmas bird count. And I know you invited me. But the bad thing is y'all are hosting y'all's on the day before my stock show. And so I just don't know that I'm going to make it, Maureen.
Yeah, it's a little tricky time of year for folks that are, doing stock show things as well. But
I wish I could be there. But I think the fun thing is to look at the history of Christmas bird count as we talk about it today. We talked about in the 1800s, that hunters would often go out with family and friends around Christmas time and compete to bring in the most animals. So that would include birds, fox, and our songbirds. And so that we were seeing that declining population, and that's not a great, that's just kind of for fun. There's no purpose.
Not a good management tool.
Yes. And so as the conservation effort began to emerge in the turn of the 20th century, or Frank Chapman proposed a new tradition in that we would do a Christmas bird census. And then the first Christmas bird count, as we know it, was held on Christmas Day in 1990 in 25 locations. And 1900, sorry, 1990, yeah. 1900, in 25 locations. And now there are over 2,500 Christmas bird counts conducted across the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Pacific, with tens of thousands of participants. And so I think that the cool thing, and Maureen and I have talked about this, is how this data set has been ongoing for hundreds of years. We're
121. This is the 121st Christmas bird count.
Yeah. And I think that's just a tradition that I would sure hate to see lost, even in a year like this. And I think that that's something where the adapt and overcome words have to come in and figure out how we do this and how we accomplish this so that we can continue that tradition.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting point, because the when Audubon emailed all the compilers, so I'm a compiler and we can talk about what that means too, but when they emailed all of us when we were trying to figure out what will this year look like, they said, in part because we have so much data, it's okay from a scientific standpoint if a circle doesn't participate this year. And so that kind of makes sense. If you're doing your master's study for 2 field seasons and you lose a whole field season, you just lost half the data that you're hoping to get. When you've been doing something for 120 years, if you have to skip your 121st year, from a scientific standpoint, it's not a big deal. But it is, kind of there's people that come to our circle that I only see them once a year. And so, I'd be pretty bummed to not see them this year. And actually, in looking at the map of circles that are, across the country, across the world, most circles, currently have an icon saying, contact the compiler. It will look like something. And so it is such a tradition, and it's something that so many people look forward to, that I think most circles are definitely trying to adapt and overcome. And of course, the good thing about birding is it's taking place outside. We can do it in socially distanced groups, or in groups of people that are already families. I have one of our, we break the Uvalde Circle into 5 different areas, and one of those areas has basically a family unit of 3 people that, they're good together anyhow. So they're going to handle that unit, and it can still get done. And, other units, we're putting people that are from a similar, town, or, similar, just everybody's in their own separate cars. So there's definitely those rules and things that we're implementing. But I think adapt and overcome is the way that most people have gone. So it's kind of fun to open up that map and still see a lot of different options, around the world.
Right, and have that tradition continue. And and I think that's interesting that, 1 year really doesn't. Losing 1 year of data isn't going to kill us. But at the end of the day, thinking about saying we've done the Christmas bird count every year since 1900, and in 2020 we didn't. It would be a sad moment, I think. So
yeah. Just on a personal note, I was appreciative that Audubon gave us the opportunity to figure that out. And for sure, there's some circles that said this isn't safe, or we can't do this well. And I emailed my folks and said, do we have enough people who are willing to do this? You've got to figure out those kinds of things. So definitely no judgment on those who are not holding circles, but I'm encouraged that a lot of people are, and that makes me smile. So
okay, well, you talked about you were a compiler and for the Uvalde Circle. So let's kind of double check this. You don't sit in a circle and count birds. Let's make sure that everybody understands what a circle is. And literally, we're not sitting in a circle counting birds.
Right.
And then what you do is the compiler.
Yeah, we would not get nearly as many species if we all just sat in a circle together. Although, if you're interested in sitting in a circle and counting birds and you're in Texas, the Texas Birding Classic does offer the big sit where you have a very small circle of people all together and you're just sitting in one spot counting as many birds as you can. And I got to do that this year too. But what it means to have
next year we should host a birding with Extension big sit team.
We really should. That would be super fun.
Where are we gonna do that?
Where?
Yeah, we have to think about that one.
We've got options. We'll think about that. Yeah.
Because AgriLife is in all 254 counties. We could pick the county office that would have the most species. And win.
You're going to get us in trouble now because there are some awfully competitive folks down on the coast that are. We could give that a try. I was going to say for our first year, we could start where I actually did mine this year because Charmaine and Collins Ganson are two of our birding buddies for Birding with Extension.
It could be
a probably host us. Well, so last year they actually, I believe that I didn't participate with them last year, but I think they were the second highest count. So even that for you and me, that's right nearby. They have a hot tub. Fun fact. For nighttime birding.
I'm in.
And yeah, in a regular year, so this year threw us off too, just to talk about the Texas Big Sit real quick, and the Texas Birding Classic, because normally it's held in May, and this year with COVID restrictions, it got postponed so it was held in October, and of course the migration and where you're going to find the most species, totally different, and especially because the day that we had chosen ended up being really hot. I don't remember our total species count, but it was much less than if, typically when we're holding it in May, just because of the weather and the time of year. And so that kind of made things a little bit different. But if we're back to normal next year, we'll see how that goes. But we totally should do a extension big sit. That'd be fun. So
okay. Anyway, so back to Christmas bird count. You're the compiler for the Uvalde chapter.
Yeah.
What does the circle look like? Okay. We don't sit in a circle.
We don't sit in a circle. So for Christmas bird count circle, every part of what's really cool about the way Christmas bird count is done is the data from a scientific standpoint. There's a lot of rules that you follow when you participate in a Christmas bird count to make sure that the data are as usable from a scientific standpoint as possible. So, for example, everywhere that wants to do a Christmas bird count has a circle that is the same dimensions. And so, as you mentioned, originally this was called the Christmas bird census. And a census, as we all know, because, if you're in the US and it's 2020, the idea is to count everyone or everything. And so, realistically, with wildlife, that doesn't happen, right? Because you can't be like, hey, birds, like,
come here,
form. How many people live in your, in your cavity, or how many birds live
How many people are in your family?
What species are you? Yeah, you can't do that. And so count is really a better term because you're still just estimating, but the goal is to count as many birds as possible within a 15-mile radius. So every Christmas bird count has a center point, and then from that, you go out 15 miles in every direction to try to count as many birds as you can. So in Uvalde, that's centered on Highway 90 and Highway 83. And then you go out around that. And as I mentioned, we break ours up. There's different ways that different people do theirs, but we break ours up into 5 kind of areas. One of those is Cook's Slough, because that's very much a hot spot. So even though it's like one little place, it's its own because it really takes like an entire morning to cover that area. And then we, have northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest kind of quadrants that teams of 2 or 3, or in the past we've had 4 or 5 people will take each of those areas, and we kind of have different routes, and your compiler will know kind of what the local hotspots are, and so you check all those places and try to find as many species and count as much as you can. So we've had years where you're excited just to get a single whatever of a species. And then there's years where last year, yeah, we drove past a field and we realized there's a big flock of sandhill cranes. And so, we had 300 sandhill cranes kind of hanging out in that area. And so it's important to get those numbers, so that the scientists who are using this data can see, okay, where where are these numbers of birds? Where are we seeing these species? Which areas have the most? Are those numbers changing over time? Yeah, and then what it means for me to be a compiler means that, there's all these different people that go out and help count in the circle, and they all have data sheets, and then they'll use eBird. A lot of times more and more people are using eBird, and they send those data to me, and then I put them all together because we add up for the species how many total individuals of that species we're seeing, how many total species we saw, and then I send that into our state compiler or our state reviewer. He makes sure it all makes sense, and then he compares all the different circles across the state, and then he sends it into Audubon, and then they use that actual data. So kind of like Bryan was talking about last week with y'all, when Bryan and Oren were talking about all the levels of reviewers that go into something on eBird. Right. All of that goes in a different way. That goes into Christmas bird count as well, just to make sure that those data are going to be the best possible. And if we see something rare or unusual, we have to document it. It either has to have a very explicit description, or if you have a photo, that's great. The first year that I did it in Uvalde, we had a scissor-tailed flycatcher in December. Normally they are south by then, and thankfully it held still and we got pictures, so that was pretty easy to document what we saw. But yeah, it's definitely not enough to be like, oh, I've been birding for 20 years and I know that it was a scissor-tailed flycatcher. You have to give a very explicit description so that they can count it as a, so that it would be a rare species for that area. So our friends down in Latin America who are doing their counts, scissor-tailed flycatcher would be normal. But.
Normal. Well, I do want to send out a wave. April is joining us, and Mary Pearl commented this morning and said good morning to us. So thanks, Mary Pearl. Hope you're having a good morning too. All right, so if you are looking for your circle or to see about your Christmas bird count being active, you can check the comments at the end of this post. We'll be posting a link to see where you can find a circle near you. And hopefully there's a Christmas bird count in your area that you can get involved in. One great piece of information, especially if you're a new or beginner birder, is reach out to that Christmas bird count coordinator and tell them that you would like to participate. Kind of tell them that you're a beginner or a new birder, and then they'll pair you with somebody who knows what they're doing, a little bit more advanced, who can help you. And then it's a great learning opportunity to get out there and go birding. So something to think about. Now,
let me say something on that real quick.
You can't say anything else.
No, because there's no rules. I can't. In normal years, I am always trying to recruit as many people as I can. And because there's a junior college in Uvalde, I've always told the junior college students that if any of them come out, I'll buy them coffee and donuts. They've yet to take me up on that.
You've never offered that to me.
That might have to be my incentive to get you out there too.
Now let's preface that. Is it for me? Does it mean Starbucks?
Oh, is it Starbucks? No, I gotta go. I always go with Local Fix in Uvalde. I gotta support.
I've never tried
local.
it. We'll have to try. Oh,
I consider their coffee superior to Starbucks.
Okay, well then we'll try it next time.
Okay, but anyhow, in a normal year, I'm trying to recruit as many people as I can. This year, I'm kind of trying to make sure we've got just that minimum coverage in our areas. I do not plan to turn anybody away. We're just having to be careful about, people understanding that they have to take their own cars and we need to follow the rules. So I've made a little bit less of a push on recruiting new people this year. That being said, if you are new and you've never done a Christmas bird count before, don't hesitate to reach out to the one closest to you. And again, normally, so we'll post the link to this map, but normally when you look at the map of Christmas bird counts, there's a ton of green circles, which means like we're open, we're taking people. This year, there's still a lot of circles, but they're mostly yellow, which means contact the compiler because they may be sharing rules with you. They may, be limiting the number of people they take, but don't be discouraged by that because even if you're new, there may be some people that typically would join who aren't joining. And should get paired with somebody who knows more. And actually, I did Christmas bird count the first year that I moved to Uvalde, and that was like the best ever crash course at learning what was there because I truly just spent that day even though I already knew some birds, I hadn't birded in this part of the country before. And so it was really a good day to like spend time with people who knew the area and had been doing the Christmas bird count for years and really learn my local species. And that's something we talk about with like our Learn to Bird and our beginner birders, is learn your local species well, and Christmas bird count's an awesome way to do that. So if you're new, even if you're like, man, I'm new at bird ID in general, contact your compiler and talk to them about it, because they very well may be thrilled to take you and have you. Maybe they'll buy you coffee and donuts. I shouldn't make that promise.
Well, and you probably shouldn't talk any more about buying people coffee and donuts, because Mary Pearl just commented that she also has never gotten the offer to have coffee and donuts from you. So you're going to create a reputation here, and you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. I like to do giveaways, and you're going to have to give away coffee and donuts. So
yeah, I'm going to get in big trouble. But Mary Pearl, if you come out and join us, I will buy you coffee and donuts also. So. Well, we actually, I guess I don't know that I can this year. This year throws us off a little bit, because some
prepackaged
donuts, kind of a fun thing that a lot of people do, because this is such a big tradition and so many people getting together. A lot of people at the end of the day do what's called a tally rally, and so all the groups bring their data sheets in. You sit down there and you count all the numbers and you count all the species, and you kind of give out the results right there. And some people will do like a potluck dinner, or you meet at a restaurant, and it's just a fun way to like kind of recap the day and get all those data in. But we can't do those this year, so that's kind of a bummer. But
anyways, okay, so before we kind of run out of time, we've talked a lot and we've had a lot of fun. Speaking of which, I have one funny moment. You painted your nails.
Oh my gosh, I did paint my nails. Yeah. That's funny that you noticed. Yeah, my cousin got married this weekend, so we got manicures and pedicures. I'm way fancier than normal.
You were talking with your hands, and I was just like, oh my gosh, Maureen had her nails painted. Not at all bird related, but everybody, just FYI, Maureen painted her nails.
It happens like once a year.
Fun day, fun fact. Mine are always done, not always Maureen. So before we move on, we were excited last week to launch our first edition of the Flycatcher, which is our new quarterly newsletter. It's got some highlights from our programs, some bird information. We kind of do a backyard bird spotlight. We do a feeder spotlight. We talk about kind of something that's relevant. And I really liked this. I really liked this month's relevant topic, and that was splitting or lumping. Because when we were out Learn to Bird, we saw the yellow-rumped warbler.
Yes. We had a bunch of yellow-rumped warblers.
Yes. And that's what we had kind of talked about in our splitting and lumping column in the Flycatcher. Speaking of which, if you want to sign up to receive the Flycatcher, use, I'll put a link in the comments today, and that will take you to the first edition of the Flycatcher, but also show you where to sign up. So splitting or lumping. Basically, you want to give the 411 on splitting and lumping and kind of talk about how that new information has kind of come out.
Yeah, I'll give a brief little recap. This would be fun to do one morning if we'd like pit me and Bryan against each other, and like one of us argues for splitting and the other argues for lumping. That could get exciting. Okay.
I'll be the lead. No curse words.
No. We keep it clean. So splitting or lumping is a topic that's relevant to Christmas bird count, because basically what it refers to is it has to do with how we define a species. And so there's a lot of birds that in the past we might say, well, these look different, right? 100 years ago, that was a lot of what we had to do with defining a species. Is can a species breed and produce viable offspring together? Can a male and female breed and produce viable offspring, and have that group of animals have similar characteristics that we see? With genetics, this has changed things a little bit. So this has been ongoing. Is okay, well, these species look similar, but they occur in different regions. Are they the same species? Are they subspecies? And so when we talk about splitting, that refers to wanting to take groups like a subspecies and make them their own species. So we're going to take those and split them up with those different characteristics. And lumping means we think they're all the same and we're going to put them all together. Modern day, looking into the genetics of things, sometimes this plays out a little bit different. So, we have certain species that we'd say, okay, well, these ones look different than these. They could interbreed if they were together, but they're separated by a large body of water. And so realistically, they never come together. we look at those genetically, and we might see actually they're pretty similar. Like, even though they look a little bit different, and even though they don't typically interbreed because they're separated by some geographical feature, they are actually pretty similar. And so we're going to lump them. We're going to put them in one species. Or we could
makes it incredibly challenging all the time because y'all are splitting and lumping every year.
Yes. And then kind of on the flip side of that, there's actually, I believe it was dark-eyed juncos in California, that they're living in the same area, but they've got a little bit of behavior differences, but some of them are migrating and some are not. And so the genetics on that, I think they're still kind of researching, but it might be like, even though they live in the same area and only have a few different characteristics, genetically, they could be super different. And so then you might split them. And so, yeah, it does make it challenging because this is constantly changing and constantly undergoing review. And so the American Ornithologist Union is the group that standardizes the common name for birds. Birds are the only group of animals that have standardized common names, because, you know, I might call it a raccoon and you call it a trash panda, right? We're talking about the same. Neither of those is standardized, right? So even raccoon's more common, but there's no standardization. So technically trash panda is just as legitimate as raccoon.
And we see trash pandas all the time.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's for all other species, it's, you know, kind of the way that goes. With birds, there are standardized common names. And so, you know, if I say scissor-tailed flycatcher, there's only one bird that could mean. But every year, the American Ornithologist Union comes together to discuss these new research that's been done, and, you know, these different species that are being considered. Do we split them or lump them? Well, this year, because of COVID, that got delayed. So everybody was kind of like waiting for that official list to come out. And I can share this link as well, but there was an Audubon article, and it said, gain a duck, lose a crow, was kind of the summary of this year's, of this year's results. And that does not mean that we found a new species of duck and, you know, a species of crow went extinct. That's not what it means. What it means is that we divided that differently. So the Mexican duck is now officially recognized as a separate species from the mallard, instead of a subspecies. And then I don't remember what species of crow it was, but there was two crows that were considered separate species that they lumped into one. So so that's relevant for Christmas bird count because, for example, on our list, we keep yellow-rumped warbler myrtles and yellow-rumped warbler audubons. And you can annotate that like on eBird, you know, or in the Christmas bird count data, so that 20 years from now, if everybody changes their mind as to whether those are two species or not, people that are keeping life lists, it'll update that. So you say, oh yeah, I've seen audubons and myrtles. Currently that counts as one species. But if that changes in the future, then it can count as two species. Or if I've seen mallards and Mexican ducks, if I've always been annotating, yeah, I know that was subspecies, I know that was a Mexican duck. Now my species count just went up by one. I didn't even do anything. I didn't see any more birds. But because I had annotated that on my eBird, then it gives me an extra species because that change was made. So,
well, and I think that's incredibly challenging sometimes for our beginner birders, because the visual differences of those two subspecies. And so whoever's out there listening who can listen to me and take my critiques is you have those two subspecies, and they they're technically one species, but they look very different. It's hard as a beginner birder sometimes to understand that this bird can look so vastly different from this bird, and they're still the same. And so because that was kind of in that hybridization is definitely kind of one of those unique pieces. And I guess in the livestock industry, this is kind of where we go into breeds. And have those different breeds of livestock. And we create very specific hybrids, and those are representative of these composite breeds, and we call them. And so it's a complicated issue, and you're right. As you bring in the genetic, as technology becomes more readily available, and we can bring in that true scientific genetics, then we add a whole nother level to it. Because now there's something concrete, and that we can say scientifically, this one is very closely related, or this one is not very closely related. But look at the small visual difference. So these two subspecies are completely, on paper and genetics, completely different scientifically. But there's only one little thing that their visual or their phenotypic look is just very similar and very different. So
yeah, anyway. And that's those ones in California that I was talking about, like the migration difference. They they might even look the same, and it could be they have different songs, or even the only thing that's different is some migrate and some don't, so they're going to look the same. So yeah, it's and so for that, yeah, even with the genetics there can be debates about how different does it need to be. So yeah, this is why this could totally this is a debate. Bryan and I may
debate it on another Cup Chat.
But yes, not today. But I will note, just because you said, it can be challenging for a beginner birder. One of the things that Bryan always emphasizes with our beginner birders that I love is that it is always okay to have something that you cannot identify two species. If I see a hawk soaring and it's, the light is bad to where all I can see is the silhouette, I'm not good with my hawk silhouettes. Bryan's fantastic, but I might only be able to say that it's a hawk. And maybe I know that it's a boodio as opposed to an accipiter, but maybe I don't. And so however specific you can get it is fine. But if you're like, man, it was a warbler, or even it was a yellow rumped warbler, but I don't know if it was myrtles or audubons, that's totally fine. That is totally, that's totally acceptable, totally legitimate on account. So we encourage our beginner birders to get out there and identify as much as you can and not worry if you don't have all of them exactly to species. So.
Exactly. It's your list. You can make it however you want it. I loved it when we were, when I was I was the brand new accounting agent, and we had just started launching Birding with Extension, and I was going out with our bird moms, and Louisa would go, it's an SOS, some sort of sparrow, not anything, she didn't even try to identify her sparrows. She's just like, I don't care. I know it's a sparrow. I'm not working on my sparrows yet. And now she does all of her sparrows. But, at that point, it was like, it's a little sparrow. That's all I care about. I'm going to put it on my list as a sparrow.
Yep.
So I think that's interesting in how, and she's a very, very good birder and knows exactly what she's looking at. But she was just like, it's a sparrow. So.
Yeah. I have my ducks down just because, I did my dissertation work out in wetlands and over a lake. But yeah, so like, where's the white is one of the things we ask on ducks. When it comes to sparrows, we actually 2 years ago for Christmas bird count, one of the people in our group had done, I think it was the Cornell class on like sparrow identification. She had just done it. And so she was like the best person ever to have in our group, because in the winter you get tons of sparrows, and she nailed all of them. But yeah, I'm to that point where there's a handful of common local ones that I know, but a lot of them it's some sort of sparrow. So,
well, anyways, on that note, as we talked about splitting or lumping, we'll post all the links that we talked about today from Christmas bird count. A link to get to the first edition of the flycatcher. Go check it out. You can also definitely subscribe to the flycatcher on our website, or when you access using the link and you access and go read it, there's a place up at the top that you can hit subscribe. We won't be sending you a ton of email. We are not Macy's or JCPenney's or some sort of, I hate that when they're like, you check out and they're like, please give us your email address. And I'm like, no, because you're going to send me an email every morning at 2 a.m. No. So our newsletter is quarterly, and other than just like massive updates like Birding the Border registration is open, Learn to Bird registration is open, you really won't hear from us except for most Wednesday mornings on Cup Chats on a regular basis. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you check out our website. It's www. It's not www.
No, it's just
wildlife.tamu.edu/birding. Registration is open for Birding the Border. We have our Building Birding on Private Lands program. Registration is open. And we're going to do registration for that for a $5 donation to our youth birding programs. And so we have 2 youth birding programs that we do every summer, and your $5 donation will go to help fund those. And that's the Wild Kids Camp and Rio Diablo Youth Birding Camp. And so Wild Kids Camp is to introduce just kids to birding, and Rio Diablo is for more of our advanced birders, or our kids who are actual birders that already started birding. And then we have our Learn to Bird program. Registration is not open for 2021 yet, but we do have the dates announced, and we are going to be launching a new location. Maureen, do you want to share that today? That's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, I do.
Tell everybody where we're going.
Yeah, so after having a successful year in West Texas in Valverde County this year, we are going to add next year a location on Long Acres Ranch in Fort Bend County, which is west of Houston. So we're going to have Learn to Bird East and Learn to Bird West. And that will be October 13th through 15th is our East Texas location. And all of that will be on the website. As Emily said, registration isn't open and won't be open for a little while, but if you're interested, mark those on your calendar, and we'll have, we'll have 2 different places, 2 different sets of species, and hopefully if we have folks who are more in the eastern part of the state, that location should be a little easier for y'all to get to.
Right. Well, and we encourage you to still come to our Valverde location because we are hopefully still going to continue that partnership with the Devils River State Natural Area. And we can show off our great natural resources out here. So it's just a area. So anyways, we want to wish you a happy Wednesday morning. We're a little bit long today, but it's been nice just to chat and have no rules. So
yeah, exactly. We'll see you guys next week. We will be on next week. So
we'll be. Oh, I'm so excited about next week. We're talking about turkeys.
We're
going to talk about frying turkeys and eating turkey and having a happy Thanksgiving. Not really. We're really going to talk about turkeys. We're really actually talking about the turkey. So, all right. Well, y'all have a wonderful week, and we will see you later. Thank you for joining us.